Well, it's approximately now 2.5 months. Tensions between United States and Iran has escalated to another level. What we are now looking at, because peace or brokering peace for now doesn't seem to be in sight. President Trump once again rejecting Iran's counter-peace offer. And this is a breaking update that is now coming in, because on part of Iran, certain terms and conditions that were set forth, Iran has refused to surrender, saying that it will never bow in front of US greed. However, President Trump is not very happy with the kind of proposal that Iran is sending via the mediator, Pakistan, in this case. And that means, as far as the Middle Eastern or the West Asia crisis is concerned, that is going to have a prolonged term effect. What we are now looking at with the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, and there is an additional naval blockade on part of the US forces. Let's in the meantime also take a look exactly what President Trump has been saying, because he's been saying that he is in no rush to end the war. The peace proposal that can come in from the Iranian leadership side, however, he's questioning as to who exactly is the leadership there in Iran. Time and again, as far as multiple offers that have now come across for when it comes to the ceasefire, putting an end to the conflict once and for all, President Trump doesn't seem to be happy with the terms and conditions. Now, in the meantime, let's talk about what the Embassy of Iran in India has shared details of Iran's response to the US peace proposal after President Trump described Tehran's reply as unacceptable. Now, according to the statement, Iran's proposal emphasizes for the fundamental rights of the Iranian people. And that seems to be the very case, because the sticking points that continue to remain, especially when it comes to the uranium enrichment, and of course, when it comes to the ballistic programs, the missile ballistic programs of Iran, Iran has now deemed to be that of national security and no compromise on that. In fact, Iran, meanwhile, had wanted, as far as nuclear talks are concerned, to be deferred, to be postponed, but this doesn't seem to be acceptable on part of President of the United States of America. That seems to be the point as far as first round of talks that happened in Islamabad failed. The second round of talks never happened. And now this is Iran and India putting out a statement saying that the details of Iran's response to the US plan, which the US president called to be unacceptable, saying that Iran's proposal submitted in response to the US plan emphasizes the fundamental rights of the Iranian people. Now, what are the fundamental rights of Iranian people? That has so far not been disclosed. Saying that Iran has rejected the US plan, which would have meant Tehran's submission to Trump's excessive demands, saying that Iran's plan stresses the necessity of the US paying war reparations and also affirming Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran has underscored the need for an end to the sanctions and to the release of the country's seized assets and property. So this is something which seems to be on the 10-point proposal initially when the talks had begun. When it comes to in Islamabad, that failed on these terms and conditions which Iran had kept forth. So, however, this statement does not mention uranium enrichment or even their ballistic missile program, because that seems to be one of the other sticking points which Iran said that they are not ready to compromise, and they wanted a deferment when it comes to the talks, the nuclear talks at least. So what has now been said, because this peace plan is concerned, President Trump is not accepting it. And let's, in the meantime, this is the response that is coming in from the Iranian side, saying that it would not hold back from retaliating against any US strikes or more foreign warships in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, Shinjoy, good morning. The escalation is something that is still being witnessed, sporadic incidents of these strikes that are being carried out in the Strait of Hormuz, however, still remains to be blocked.
Yes, there has been intermittent fighting in recent days, but the basic problem lies in the fact that after those 40 days of fighting, a full-scale war really, both sides declared victory. When a side declares victory, historically, it sets terms. So America has set terms, the Iranians have set terms, and naturally the two sets of terms are completely different from each other. They have very little in common. So once that is so, then it's very difficult to find a middle ground. Now, the Americans want the Strait of Hormuz to be opened. They want the Iranians to return the 460 kilos of enriched uranium.
Yes.
The Iranians, on the other hand, want the blockade to be lifted and sanctions to be lifted. Now, these are completely different issues. Now, to the Iranians, the Americans are saying no. To the Americans, the Iranians are saying no.
Yes.
So if that is where you are, you're likely to face a logjam. And that's exactly what has happened.
Absolutely.
only
Shinjoy, please
fear.
stay on with us. Let me introduce our guest. Let's get an America point of view as well. We have Matthew Vandam joining us. He's a foreign affairs expert from Washington. Matthew, good evening to you. Let's, in the meantime, understand what has been the President Trump's claim, because he's been saying that Tehran's terms and conditions were totally unacceptable. So does it raise the likelihood of renewed conflict?
I think it certainly does. It certainly does. President Trump was unhappy with the Iranian insistence that the U.S. pay reparations to Iran for, the war that it has been waging against Iran, and that's a very strange request, and I think it indicates how unrealistic the Iranian side is, and I don't think they really want to resolve this matter. They want to keep fighting. They want to retain their enriched uranium so they can build nuclear bombs. And they want, they think they should be left, they're not doing anything wrong in their view, and they want to be left alone by the United States and Israel. So they're going to keep fighting. And I don't think I don't think negotiations are going to go anywhere.
So what are we now looking at? Because this is deadlock versus another deadlock, because Iran has responded, Matthew, by warning that it will not hold back from retaliating against any U.S. strikes or even permit more foreign warships in the Strait of Hormuz. So what are we now looking at? There is a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran, and then there is the U.S. naval blockade.
Right. So you got the two side-by-side blockades. I'm still, scratching my head over how that works. So there's like a blockade and a counter blockade. But anyway, nothing is moving through the Strait of Hormuz right now. And, this is a problem. It's driving up oil prices because 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this Strait of Hormuz on a regular basis. I'm not sure what else Iran can do. Iran doesn't have a navy anymore. It was destroyed. It's in Davy Jones' locker at the bottom of the sea. There's no air force. It has missiles. It has drones.
But who are you talking to, Matthew? Because President Trump is also saying that there is no leadership. So who exactly are you engaging with when we talk about these peace proposals?
Well, that is a question. The Iran state media says that Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei is still in control, is in fact recovered enough that he's in control of their country. And so there's a question about who he's dealing with. Is the United States dealing with the Revolutionary Guard, or is it dealing with the Supreme Leader himself? So this is a problem, especially in an unstable situation where various factions in the Iranian hierarchy are competing for control of the country.
Well, the crisis is there in Iran as well. But Shinjoy, Tehran publicly, however, has maintained a very defiant line, despite the behind-the-scenes diplomacy and the talks that has been taking place.
Yes, at this point, it's very clear that both sides have very little to agree upon. So if the Iranians don't agree with what the Americans are saying, and the Americans don't agree with what Iran is saying, then there is a deadlock. Now, if there is a deadlock, how do you resolve the deadlock? That's really the question. Now, this also means that there is a risk, and there is a serious risk of further hostilities. Now, if that happens, that is going to be very, very damaging, not just for the region, but perhaps for the world, because the Americans have threatened to hit Iran's oil installations, all the pipelines, all the other strategic infrastructure. The Iranians could do exactly the same with the Gulf states. They could hit the oil wells, they could hit the refineries, as they have once or twice, and they could hit the desalination plants.
Yes.
Now, if that happens, we are looking at an area of darkness. Now, is that going to happen? We don't know.
And as far as when an indirect, impact and the pressure is something that the world has been facing because of this double blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. We're looking at Prime Minister Narendra Modi also making an appeal, and Israel seems to be in a wait-and-watch situation and never wanted the ceasefire in the first place. But they say that there is still nuclear material, enriched uranium in Iran that has to be taken out, and there is still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. So the world is in a wait-and-watch mode. President Trump, however, rejecting Tehran's counter-peace proposal. Thank you very much, Matthew, for your time and for your point of view. Srinjoy, to you as well. Thank you very much for joining us here on the broadcast.